Marie Johanne, I've been living with you for 10 years now, and I confess when I look back on these years, I realize that to me you really incarnate the feminine in what I've always considered to be the most beautiful and the best of the feminine. And it's true, we talk a lot about the role of women today, and I would like to talk especially about the sacred aspect of the feminine. And this is much talked about, but this expression is used frequently, and I think it bears clarification. What does the sacred feminine represent for you? Yes, it's like a fashion that emerged and for which you're a little bit responsible with the publication of Essenian Perspectives in 1996 on the sacred feminine and also with the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Let us say that this sacred feminine annoys certain men who believe it to be akin to feminist movements. For me, the nation of the sacred feminine has really nothing to do with either the male or the female aspect. The feminine fire is a principle of initiation, so it's the birth of a metamorphosis, not only for men but for the whole of humanity, which is now being called into metamorphosis, to develop a sense of intuition, of tenderness, of compassion and welcoming, rather than a desire for revenge of the matriarchy against the patriarchy. It's an old story that's been going on for decades and centuries, and we could discuss it. Indeed, it's an inexhaustible theme, so you do well to make a difference between the feminist movement in general and the sacred feminine. The sacred feminine is the development of our androgyny, or the right balance between the best of our male aspect and our female aspect, whether we are woman or man. So for us women who are, in a more general sense, bearers of life, it's really about the tenderness, the compassion, and the welcoming of the other to open up to change. Birthing brings a new life into the world. And currently, we're undergoing a great change of consciousness. So this birthing really is the new humanity to come. What does the word sacred mean to you? Because very often when we use the word sacred, there's somewhat of a notion of religion or dogma in the backdrop. I imagine this is not what sacred means for you. No, the sacred is what has a relationship with the divine within us, the best of ourselves. So the expression of the best of the human being itself. Today, when we refer to the sacred feminine, there's a lot of talk about shamanism. Do you consider yourself a shaman? It's difficult to determine. The shaman today is in some ways what has replaced the medium. I can't dispute that they're very good mediums, as they're very good shamans. And I consider myself as much a medium as a shaman. First, a shaman in relation to my sensibility, because it's important to note that the feminine is also a sensibility and an intuitive perception. My sensitivity toward beings of nature, the energies of the earth, connected to what exists at a higher level, that is to say, all the changes and the expansion of the divine, we are intended to incarnate. So I feel like a shaman also because when I do rituals all over the world in your company, they are never insignificant, yet not belonging to the American Indian tradition. It's a universal form of shamanism, that in that spirits of the earth and of nature are invoked and channeled by my body through the help of Christic presences. The avatar Babaji, for example. In all modesty, these rituals act a lot internally, because you're asking me the question. So one may think that because I don't call myself a shaman or I don't wear the shamanic attire, that it's like a staging. But it's truly an expression in the sense that it's not me who carries out these rituals. It's one of the ways through which you translate the sacred, if I understand correctly. But do you think that this notion of shamanism or sacred femininity, do you think it's a fashion, or is it really here to stay? I hope it's not a fashion, and that what derives from the bad side of a fashion, such as I'll make myself a shaman or whatever, will redress and find again an attitude of the exploration and the explosion of the sacred feminine with all the nobility that it is intended to express. Shamanism is part of the expression of the initiation of the female Mother Earth, which is also driven by the verb, with the father who brings the verb while the mother brings tenderness. I know, Marie Johanne, that you're very sensitive to what you call globally the Christ energy. How do you reconcile this with your shamanic perceptions and the role of intermediary that you have between the world of the invisible and the Christ energy, because few people manage to make this connection? Well, through the seniority of my soul and through ancient memories from 11,000 years ago in the Elvish times, but also through my life experience from 2,000 years ago alongside the Christ. You have this memory, and it's far too long to mention it here, but your sense of the sacred is, I imagine, very much rooted in this, thanks to what Christ taught us regarding this. A Christ that is religion independent, if I understand. Yes, entirely external to dogma. In your opinion, if this concept of the sacred feminine expands, as we've seen it expand, don't we run the risk that it will reinforce a sort of division along the lines of masculine-feminine? Is there a sacred masculine as well? You touched on this a little bit earlier, and I'd like you to clarify your thought. Yes, that's what I fear, the relegation of the masculine into a prison of a crawling human. It's lame to conceive the sacred feminine without the presence of the masculine, because childbirth without the presence of a man is totally aberrant. So what you're trying to tell us is that today we think a little too much of man as a horizontal force and women as a vertical force for her sacred side. Exactly, and the masculine has as much verticality as the feminine. As man aspires to this verticality, he feels in him the feminine aspect. I know a lot of feminine men, in fact, far more feminine than many women. I could name a few. I could name Éric Grange, Éric Dudois, of my students, Marc Medvezek, Francis Hoffmann, Joachim Marceau. You see them as a sort of point of balance. how touching they are in the practice of Essene and Egyptian therapies. We practice in groups, and sometimes the men lend themselves as female models. And it's very touching to see that and to hear them say afterwards, they say, Marie Johanne, I felt like I had ovaries and a uterus, and it touched me deeply that there's this beautiful movement right now that's prevalent among men, and I would like to see it welcomed as a sacred masculine. Yes, I believe we shouldn't fall into duality. Above all, no division and going into a pattern of matriarchy, patriarchy. Matriarchy is not going to become the patriarchy in disguise. So what can we hope for all of this? What can we wish for? Perhaps for next year, I'm wishing for a day devoted to the sacred male and female, united in conscience, because I love you women and I love you men. Perhaps that's the true meaning of the sacred. It's to find in each one of us the point of balance. That is what the sacred is, to deny nothing, to love all sides of ourselves in the best that they can contribute. Thank you. Marie Johanne.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you.